Welcome to Getting Started with Proxmox 8. Today we're going to be looking at how to create containers and VMs, both in the style of using an ISO and an installation technique, and how to use Cloud-init images. I'm also going to further break down Cloud-init images to using the Proxmox Cloud-init tool and my own personal customized way. And I say personal kind of in quotes. It's not just my tool or techniques, but one that I much enjoy. So in order to create a VM, the first thing we're going to need to do is understand how to get an ISO, at least for the installation technique. So to do that, here at our Proxmox server, which we called VE Home, yours is most likely called PXE if you did a default install. We're going to select our local drive, and then we're going to select ISO images. Now you can see here that I already have a few images. The first technique for getting an image is to upload one to your server that's already been downloaded to your computer that you're viewing the web interface with. To do that, we're going to press upload, select the file. In my case, the file is going to be here at the desktop in an ISO. And then once that's selected, everything will be filled out. At this point, if you so choose, you can actually hash your image. Now, hashing is a great security technique to make sure that you're actually uploading what you believe that you're uploading to your system. In my case, I hashed this on my client computer, and I'm fairly confident that I'm going to be uploading the same thing, so I'm not going to worry about it. But in later videos, I'm going to show you how to do that. So at this point, we can now hit upload, and you can see a window appears, and it says task OK. So we know this ISO has been uploaded to our Proxmox server. We can close this window out, and we should now see it here. Now, if I wanted to remove this ISO from my system, we can go ahead, select the ISO, and click remove, and then press yes, and you see the ISO has been removed. The other way that we can use to download an ISO image to our Proxmox server is the direct download technique, or download from URL, with this button here. Let's go ahead and click it, and let's click advanced at this point, because we're going to want to use the features inside of the advanced window. The first thing it's going to ask for is the URL. I'm heading here to the Dibian site. That's where I'm going to be gathering the information to download this particular ISO. So here at Dibian, you can see that we're available to download the version 12 of Debian Net Installer. Let's right click on it, and then we're going to go to copy link. Now, if you're using Windows or a Mac, the terminology might be a little bit different, but the technique's the same. Right click on it, find the exact tab that describes what you want to do, and click on that. So now here under URL, let's select it, right click again, and paste. Now let's press query URL, and it fills in the ISO name here. Now let's check hash, and for Debian it's 512. If we view right here, you can see download checksum, SHA 512 sums. Let's click on that, select the string because this is for the particular download or ISO that I downloaded. Copy it again, in checksum, click, and paste. This is going to automatically download the Debian image and hash it to make sure that you have downloaded what you believe you've downloaded. So let's go ahead and hit download. Now at any point you can close this window out and it'll run in the background with a nice little spinning wheel down in this lower footer section of the web interface. If you want to bring it up and view what's going on, just double click on it. I'll be back when this is done downloading to show you the next steps on creating a VM using an ISO and installer technique. Okay, so now we've successfully downloaded Debian 12 and hashed it, and you can see that again, we have task OK. So we're ready to close this window and move on. So the next step in creating a VM using the ISO installer technique is to come up here and click Create VM. Here at Create VM, we give it a name and then press Next. We're going to select local and the ISO that we download, in our case, Debian 12. Press Next, and we're going to leave most everything here alone, but let's go ahead and check qemu-guest-agent. qemu-guest-agent is a tool used to communicate more accurately with Proxmox. And what this is going to allow you to do is get more accurate information about RAM and CPU usage, as well as more effectively communicate with the system for restarts and shutdowns. Everything else can be left alone. For our disk, we'll leave it as 32 gigs. As this particular server has a SSD in it, and we're going to be installing to that SSD, we're also going to check discard. Discard is going to activate trim so that we can more adequately take care of our SSD and not wear it out as fast. Let's go ahead and hit next. Debian likes to have a minimum of 2 cores, although I believe it'll operate on 1, and 2 gigs of RAM, 2 gigs being the minimum suggested requirement for Debian. So now we can hit next, and we're going to configure our network settings. In my case, I'm going to go in here and change this bridge to a bridge that I have on my network that I want to use. Now, if you don't have a configured bridge, or only have the default bridge rather, don't worry, you don't have to change it. Just use the bridge that best fits your needs. Hit next, confirm everything looks correct, and hit finish. Proxmox is now going to build the VM for you, and mine's right here. Now, if I have any other further configurations like adding USB drives or other things that I may want to do with this VM before I start the installation or even after, I can select hardware, come up here to add, and do something like add a USB or a serial port. I can even modify the display settings if I want to use different VGA types. And sometimes, depending on your system, Spice might be beneficial if you're using Windows or Linux. It offers much better performance than the no VNC option. Today we're going to leave ours as default though, and we're not going to add a USB drive. The other thing you want to take note of is this options tab here. We can change the name of the VM. We can tell Proxmox whether we want the VM to boot up right away when the system restarts or not, and even configure the boot order here. So let's go ahead and start up this VM by pressing Start and Console. Okay, so we have Debian 12 installed here, and I did choose to install the graphical version so I can demonstrate a few things for you. Notice with no VNC, the mouse does lag behind the mouse of your host server. I've found with no hardware changes that this always happens. I've even experienced this happening with GPUs that were passed through. For some reason, it seems just to be part of no VNC, and there seems to be a little lag. We don't, however, experience this with Spice and some of the other virtualization options, just as a note. So in order to remove a CT image or container image here in Proxmox, you're going to select your local drive or your drive that you store your images on. By default, that's going to be called local. Then you're going to select container templates, select your drive, and press remove, and then yes. So the easiest way to download templates here on Proxmox 8 is going to be to use the templates feature right here. So to find this window, you're going to select your local drive or your drive that you desire to install or to store your container templates on, CT templates, and then you're going to go to templates. Today I'm going to be downloading Ubuntu 23.04, so I'm just going to select it here from the list and press download. Now at any point during this download, you can close this screen. It'll stay running in your bar down here, and you can see that it is running by the circular spinning wheel. If you wish to open it, just double click on it, and I'll be back to show you how to create a template after this finishes downloading. Okay, so now that our container template is done downloading, we can see that we have task okay. We can go ahead and close the window if you haven't already done so, and we should see it shown up here. If you don't already see it show up, go ahead and refresh the window, and it should show up at that point. So the next thing you're going to need to do is to click Create CT up here at the top, and then fill in the host name, enter a password. You may need to change unprivileged or privileged depending on what you're running in the container, but most of the time we try to run all containers as unprivileged. Hit next, select your template, press next, select your drive configuration. By default, you're given 8 gigs. Today we're going to leave ours as 8 gigs. Select the number of CPU cores that this container is able to access. 1 will usually be sufficient for a lot of applications, but if you need more, you can always go ahead and increase it at this point. Next, 512 is default RAM. We're also going to leave that here today, but you can increase it here. It is listed in megabytes. Hit next. Configure your bridge and network configuration settings. For us, I'm going to change the bridge to one that I want to use. And then I can choose whether or not I want a static IP address or a DHCP IP address. If I choose static, I need to enter both the gateway IP and the IP for the container, followed by the CIDR notation. So if I entered 192.168.1.1, I need to also add a /24 at the end of it for a standard network size. I'm selecting DHCP here today, so I'm just going to check that. Press next. If you need to configure any custom DNS options, you can do so here. Press next, and if everything looks all right, hit finish, and your system should create your container. With your container finished, you should see task OK. You can go ahead and close the screen. All right, so now that we have the VM created, we can go ahead and select it, press start and console, and then once it's fully booted, you can go ahead and log in with root and the password that you set up during the installation and begin working with it just as you would most CLI systems for servers. Okay, so the last way that we can create a VM is through something called a Cloud-init. Now the process is a little bit more complex at first, but can be quite rewarding as it allows you to highly customize an image that can be deployed time and time again very easily. So the first thing we're going to need to do is gather up a cloud image for our Proxmox server. And I've gone ahead and preloaded the image page for Lunar Lobster 23.04. And scrolling down through here, we can find a bunch of different images, but we're going to choose an IMG image that's labeled Cloud-init. So again, we're going to right click on it and copy link. Now here at our Proxmox server, we're going to select our server and open shell. I'm just going to run an ls real quick to make sure that I don't have a bunch of other things here. And I actually have this image already on my system. So I will be right back after I remove this stuff and clean it up. So you can see here, I just ran an ls command and I no longer have the Ubuntu 23.04 images on my server. They've been cleaned up. So we can start now by gathering our image by running a command called wget and then pasting in the URL that we got from the Ubuntu page for the image, and then we can press enter. This will download the image directly to our server. Alrighty, so now that we have our image downloaded, we can again run the ls command and we find that we have the image right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy the name of it. And the first thing I'm going to run is the command cp. And I'm going to paste the name. Then I'm going to shorten it just to make it easier to type. And then I'm changing from a .img to qemu-guest-agent. Now I can do that just simply with a cp command. Now running ls, you can see that we have a second file called Ubuntu 23.04 qemu-guest-agent. Now that this image file is a qemu-guest-agent, we can use qemu-img tool to resize this image to whatever size we need to begin to work with it. So we can do that with qemu-img space resize, file name, and then the size we want. In my case, I'm going to do 10 gigs. And it helps if you don't have a typo. So now that our image is resized, we can close the shell for just a few minutes to do the rest of our process. So with the shell closed, we're going to come up and create a VM, give it a name, press next, select no media. We can leave BIOS and everything alone, and select qemu-guest-agent, press next, delete our disk. CPU, we'll give it 2, memory 2 gigs, network, and verify the options. If we're happy with it, press finish. Now our VM's created down here, and we need to take note that our VM's called 108, and go to hardware, then press add, and we need to add a Cloud-init drive. We can leave IDE as the bus type. For storage, we're going to select local LVM and press add. Now over here, we want to go ahead and select IP config, hit edit, and select whether we want a static IP address or a DHCP. I'm selecting DHCP. If you do select static, note we need to add a /24 at the end for the CIDR notation. Hit regen image. We also, using the Proxmox tool, need to fill out our username. We'll call ours VE today, and our password. Press regen image. Now we can go back to our shell, and you notice to go back to shell, I selected our server and then press shell. I always run an ls so I can see my images, and I like to copy my file name. Now I'm going to enter qm import, so IMPORT DISK, all one word, the location, in our case it's 118, the file name, and the location where it's going to be installed. In our case, local-LVM. Hit enter. It's going to upload our file to our disk. Once it says it's successful in uploading our file to the disk, we can head back to our web interface, select 118, select hardware, and we're going to see unused disk 0. Select that, press edit, Select discard if you're using an SSD like we are, and go ahead and press add. Now, because we don't have a disk when we configure the initial VM configuration, we need to go to Options, Boot Order, Edit, and we need to move our newly added disk right here to the top and check it. Then press OK, and we're ready to start up our newly made VM by pressing Start and Console. We can log in with the username that was set up, VE, and the password that was set up. There you have it. There's a successfully created Cloud-init image here on Proxmox. Now, if we look at that last Cloud-init image VM that we created, you notice when we come up here to Summary that we don't have qemu-guest-agent. We have no information about that. So even though when we created this VM, we checked the box for qemu-guest-agent, we're not getting any out, and that's because we need to install qemu-guest-agent. Now that's a pretty easy process. You can head over here, enter sudo apt install qemu-guest-agent. There's actually a much easier way that we can do this, and we can actually embed this file directly into our installation image, so we never have to come back and do that or do any part of that. So let me go ahead, shut this VM down, and I'll be back with you in just a second to show you how to do that. So in order to customize your image, you're actually going to need a new tool package, and we're going to install that directly on our Proxmox server here at the shell. If you don't remember, to get to the shell, you're going to select your server and press shell here, and you're going to come up with a screen that looks similar to this. Well, the screen's actually going to look like this one. Now we can run apt install libguestfs-tools-y, and you can see that I already have this on. Now we're going to choose to work with this Ubuntu 23.04 qemu-img that we have here. So the first part of the command that we're going to use to do this is going to be virt-customize-a, then the file name, in our case Ubuntu 23.04 qemu, and the command we want to execute. In my case, -- install qemu-guest-agent. Now we can press enter, and if all goes well, we're going to have qemu-guest-agent embedded directly into our image. So now, if we wanted to go ahead and add this image back to that same VM, we could just create a process and add that VM and delete this one, or we can actually come in here. We can select the Cloud-init VM, come here to Hardware, select the disk, press Attach, click Yes, select the disk image, and remove it, pressing Yes. Then come back to Shell, use that same qm-import disk command, press Enter, re-upload that file to our VM. When it says it's successful, we can close our shell, select our disk, hit Edit, check Discard if you have an SSD, press Add, go to Options, Boot Order, Edit, move your newly added drive to the top, check it to enable it, select OK, press Start Console. Now this time, when we come back and select Summary, you can see under IPs, we actually no longer have the no qemu-guest-agent installed. We get the IP address of our VM. So with this, now the last thing we need to do is know how to clean up our server. Remove these containers and remove these VMs. The first thing we need to do is make sure the VM or the container is shut down. We can do that by selecting the container or VM and pressing shutdown right here. This will go ahead and shut down the container. Now, if it particularly doesn't want to shut down, we can also select the caret right here, and then we could select stop. Now, selecting the VM, we can go up here to more, click on the caret, and click remove. We need to enter the VM's ID, in our case 118, and if we want to remove all the files from our disk, which we most likely do, this will not remove the image that we created that was in the root directory, but just the images connected to the VM itself. So the imported image, we can check these two boxes, press remove, and Proxmox gets rid of the image. The same thing can be done for our container that we created right here by selecting the container, going to more, going to remove, entering the ID number, checking our boxes if we want to destroy everything, and pressing remove. So I hope this clarified how to work with VMs and containers here in Proxmox 8, and you consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to help virtualize everything, continue to grow, and bring you more great content on virtualization and Proxmox. As always, have a good night.